Disrupted: My Misadventure in the Startup Bubble, by Dan Lyons. Introduction. Imagine for a moment. You're 52 years old. You've spent your entire life mastering a craft, becoming a respected writer for one of the most famous magazines in the world, Newsweek. Your job is your identity. Then one day, the phone rings, and in a single, cold conversation, it's all gone. Your job is eliminated. Now imagine, 9 months later, after the fear and the uncertainty, you've pulled off the impossible. You've reinvented yourself. You're walking into the gleaming headquarters of one of the hottest tech startups on the East Coast. It's a world of bright colors, endless snacks, and youthful energy. A world that promises not just a job, but a mission. This is your fresh start. This is your comeback story. You walk to your new desk, ready to begin. But instead of a chair, there's a giant, orange, rubber bouncy ball. And in that moment, as you stare at this ridiculous ball, trying to figure out how to sit on it without toppling over in front of 24 colleagues who are all half your age, a tiny voice in your head starts to whisper, "You've made a very big mistake." This is the true story of Dan Lyons, a veteran journalist who dove headfirst into the strange, bewildering, and often hilarious world of a tech startup. His book, Disrupted, isn't just a diary of his time there. It's a peek behind the curtain of the entire modern work culture. It's a world filled with talk of changing the world, but also with Nerf gun battles, cult-like rituals, and a level of absurdity that's hard to believe. What Dan Lyons discovered is a secret that many people feel but can't quite put into words, that behind the free beer, the nap rooms, and the talk of being a family, the modern workplace is often a bizarre and confusing kingdom. By the end of our journey today, you will understand the secret language of this new world. You will learn how to tell the difference between a real mission and a clever marketing slogan. And most importantly, you will see how one man's misadventure can become a powerful lesson in finding your own path, no matter your age. Book summary. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating phone call. Dan Lyons is at the peak of his career. He's the technology editor at Newsweek, a job he loves, writing about subjects that fascinate him. He's in his early 50s, happily married with 2 young kids, and feels secure. Then, the ground gives way. In the summer of 2012, his editor, an old friend he's known for 20 years, calls him. "I have some bad news," she says. "Your job is being eliminated, just like that. No warning, no severance package to speak of, just 2 weeks of pay and then, nothing." The magazine business, like so many others, is being disrupted by the internet, and he's a casualty. The cruel irony? Not long before, Newsweek had run a cover story titled, "The Beached White Male," about successful, middle-aged men who were being laid off and finding it impossible to get hired again. Suddenly, Dan wasn't writing the story anymore. He was the story. The fear of never working again is a heavy weight. He takes a grueling job as an editor for a small tech website called ReadWrite, which requires him to fly back and forth across the country, living out of a hotel in San Francisco. It's a paycheck, but it's draining him. But being in San Francisco, at the heart of the new tech boom, plants a seed. All around him, he sees a kind of gold rush. College dropouts in hoodies are raising millions of dollars for companies that sell scooter rentals or artisanal toast. It feels a lot like the first dot-com bubble of the late 90s, a time he covered as a journalist, a time of irrational hype that ended in a spectacular crash. He knows it's probably a house of cards, destined to fall. But this time, something is different. Maybe it's because he's older, or has a family to support, or is just tired of struggling in a dying industry. He has an epiphany one evening while having a drink with an investment banker friend. The friend tells him a tsunami of money, $1 trillion transfer of wealth, is about to hit Silicon Valley. He leans in and shares an old Wall Street saying, "When the ducks quack, feed them." What he means is, right now, investors, the ducks, are hungry for anything that looks like a tech startup. Your job isn't to question it. Your job is to give them what they want. In that moment, Dan Lyons decides he's done watching from the sidelines. He's going to join the game. He's going to feed the ducks. He just needs to find the right startup to bet on. Soon, he finds it. A software company just a few miles from his home in Massachusetts called HubSpot. He's never heard of it, but his venture capital friends tell him it's the real deal, a unicorn in the making, headed for a massive IPO. They make something called inbound marketing software, a tool to help businesses attract customers online instead of chasing them with ads. The interview process is seductive. He meets the co-founders, Brian Halligan and Dharmesh Shah, two guys from MIT who seem smart and down to earth. They tell him the company's blog, their main marketing tool, has become terrible and they need someone with his experience to elevate it. They offer him a unique title, Marketing Fellow. It sounds prestigious, academic, like he'll be a wise advisor to the company. He turns down other offers, including one that would pay him far more money, and bets on HubSpot. This, he believes, is his ticket. His first day is April 15, 2013. He arrives at the gleaming, renovated brick building, palms a little sweaty, ready to begin his new life. And this is where the dream begins to unravel. No one is expecting him. The young receptionist has no record of him. The man who hired him, the chief marketing officer nicknamed Cranium, isn't even in the office. Neither is his supposed number two, wingman. Dan is left sitting on an orange couch in the lobby, watching TED Talks on a loop, feeling more and more confused. Eventually, a friendly 20-something named Zach comes to get him. Zach gives him a tour of the office, which looks less like a workplace and more like a Montessori preschool. There are bright colors everywhere, a nap room with a hammock, kitchens stocked with espresso machines and free beer, and the pride and joy of the office, a giant wall of candy dispensers. Dogs roam the halls, Nerf gun battles erupt in the open-plan workspaces, and every 3 months, everyone has to switch desks in a seating hack to remind them that change is constant. It all feels a bit forced, like everyone is trying a little too hard to convince themselves they're having fun. After the tour, Zach takes him into a conference room to draw an organizational chart on a whiteboard. He draws a complex tree of marketing teams, and as he does, Dan has a horrifying realization. Zach, the young man he assumed was an administrative assistant, draws his own name on the chart just above the content team. "Wait a minute," Dan says, his voice halting. "Does that mean you're my boss?" The blood drains from his face. Zach is 5 years out of college. 9 months ago, Dan was the technology editor of Newsweek, a person whose calls Zach wouldn't have been able to get returned. Now, this kid is his manager. It gets worse. Zach leads him to a cramped, shoebox-sized room where about 20 young women are hunched over laptops. This, they literally call it, is the content factory. These are his new colleagues, fresh out of college, all seemingly named Ashley or Brittany. They write blog posts with titles like 5 Ways to Make Your Landing Pages Awesome. Dan Lyons, the seasoned journalist, has become a cog in a machine that churns out low-grade marketing material. Zach points to his new desk. And there, instead of a chair, is that giant, orange bouncy ball. This is the beginning of Dan's immersion into what he calls the happy, awesome startup cult. All new employees must go through a 2-week training program that feels more like indoctrination. Their trainer, a man named Dave, tells them with complete sincerity, HubSpot is leading a revolution. A movement. HubSpot is changing the world. He tells them they aren't just sending out marketing emails, they are creating lovable marketing content. It's pure Orwellian doublespeak. The junk mail they help companies send isn't spam, it's anti-spam. They even have t-shirts that say "Make love, not spam." The new recruits, mostly kids in their first jobs, seem to buy it all. They're told it's harder to get a job at HubSpot than to get into Harvard, a ridiculous claim that everyone repeats with pride. The company has its own language, which Dan calls HubSpeak. People talk about KPIs, key performance indicators, DRIs, directly responsible individuals, and SFTC, solve for the customer. When someone gets fired, it's not called getting fired. It's called a graduation. An email will go out saying, "Team, just letting you know that Derek has graduated from HubSpot, and we're excited to see how he uses his superpowers in his next big adventure." And just like that, Derek is gone. The culture is governed by a 128-slide PowerPoint deck called the Culture Code, created by co-founder Dharmesh Shah. It defines what it means to be HubSpotty with an acronym called HEART: humble, effective, adaptable, remarkable, and transparent. It's a corporate utopia on paper, but in reality, it feels like a cult. The absurdity reaches its peak when Dan learns about Molly. One day, everyone in the marketing department is told to promote a new article by Dharmesh. The article explains his brilliant new management technique. He brings a teddy bear to executive meetings. The teddy bear, named Molly, sits in a chair at the table to represent the customer. Dan is speechless. Grown adults are sitting in meetings, talking to a teddy bear, and acting like this is a profound innovation. But when he looks at the comments online, people are praising it. What a brilliant idea, they write. He feels like he's taking crazy pills. The company is run by what Steve Jobs used to call a bozo explosion. Mediocre early employees have risen through the ranks and are now in charge. They believe their own hype. Cranium, the CMO, sends emails telling his team they are the best marketing department in the world, and that giants like Facebook and Google are jealous of them. It's delusional. Dan tries to do the job he was hired for, to make the blog better. He writes a detailed memo with constructive criticism. But Zach, his young boss, shares it with the very women who run the blog. From that day on, they hate him. His articles are delayed, rejected, and edited into oblivion. He finally understands the blog's true purpose. It has nothing to do with thought leadership or quality journalism. Its only goal is to generate leads for the sales department. Every post is designed to get Mary the marketer, their target customer persona, to download an ebook and give up her email address. Dan's thoughtful articles don't generate leads. He's not helping, he's hurting the numbers. His boss, Wingman, eventually tells him they need to stop the experiment with smart content and make the blog, in Dan's words, a lot more dumberer. Frustrated, Dan goes over everyone's heads and pitches a new idea directly to the founders, Halligan and Shaw, a separate, high-end online magazine. They love it. They give him their blessing and tell him to get started. He's ecstatic. This is his chance. But in the strange world of HubSpot, the founders' approval means nothing. The middle managers, Cranium and Wingman, quietly kill the project. Instead of running his own magazine, Dan is moved out of the content factory and into the loudest room in the building, the telemarketing call center, a place the employees call the spider monkey room. It's a deafening boiler room where young sales reps in backward baseball caps bark into headsets all day long, trying to hit their quotas. This, he realizes, is the real heart of HubSpot. Not the feel-good culture code, but this high-pressure, burn-and-churn sales machine. Just when he's ready to give up, a new boss is hired to run the content team. His name is Trotsky. At first, Trotsky seems like an ally, another adult in the building. He's in his 40s, covered in tattoos, and seems to see the absurdity of HubSpot just as clearly as Dan does. He tells Dan he's being wasted and promises to give him more meaningful work. For a moment, things seem to be looking up. Then comes the New York Times article. The CEO, Brian Halligan, gives an interview where he says something truly astonishing. In the tech world, gray hair and experience are really overrated. Dan, the gray-haired, experienced guy in the office, can't resist. He posts a snarky comment on Facebook, sharing the article with the caption, "Says the CEO of the company where I fucking work." The post explodes. Hundreds of people comment, sharing their own stories of age discrimination in the tech industry. It creates a PR nightmare for HubSpot. Spinner, the head of PR, and Cranium, the CMO, are furious. Dan figures he'll be fired. But he realizes they can't fire him. Firing an older employee for calling out the CEO's ageist comments would be a legal and public relations disaster, especially with an IPO on the horizon. His sarcastic comment has, ironically, made him untouchable. But they can't fire him, so they decide to make his life a living hell until he quits on his own. And his new friend, Trotsky, becomes the instrument of his torment. Suddenly, Trotsky turns on him. The friendly ally is gone, replaced by a cold, abusive manager. Every tiny action is scrutinized. A small joke on Facebook about a previous office squabble becomes a grave error that puts him on the verge of being fired. He is subjected to a humiliating annual review where Trotsky gives him a score of 2 out of 5 for his heart. He tells Dan that he asked 2 of his colleagues for feedback, and neither of them would even respond. "What do you think that says about you?" Trotsky asks, twisting the knife. He even tells Dan that he spoke to one of his former colleagues from a previous job, who supposedly said Dan was smart, but acerbic, implying that Dan has been unliked his whole career and just didn't know it. It's a campaign of psychological warfare designed to break him. Just as Dan is hitting rock bottom, a lifeline appears. He gets a call from an agent in Hollywood. The creators of the HBO show Silicon Valley want him to join their writing staff. It's an escape. He takes a leave of absence from HubSpot and spends 14 weeks in Los Angeles, working with brilliant, funny people in a world where sarcasm isn't a fireable offense. It's a job requirement. The experience is liberating, and it makes one thing crystal clear: he can never go back to HubSpot. He returns to Boston only to quit. The process is as cold and bizarre as everything else at the company. Though he gives 6 weeks' notice, he is immediately terminated. His laptop is confiscated, and he is escorted out of the building. His graduation is complete. But the story doesn't end there. A few months after he leaves, HubSpot puts out a shocking press release. Mike Volpe, a.k.a. Cranium, has been fired. Joe Chernoff, a.k.a. Trotsky, has resigned. The reason? They had engaged in inappropriate attempts to procure a draft manuscript of a book about the company. His book. The company notifies the appropriate legal authorities, and the FBI launches an investigation. In the end, no criminal charges are filed, and the company never reveals what exactly happened. But the scandal confirms the very essence of what Dan Lyons experienced: that behind the happy, awesome, orange-colored facade was a culture that was, at its core, deeply and strangely dysfunctional. The company he chose to bet on did have its successful IPO. The founders and investors made a fortune. But for Dan Lyons, the misadventure was over. He had gone looking for a new career and instead found a story that was darker, funnier, and far more human than he ever could have imagined. Commentary. When you read a story like Dan Lyons' journey through HubSpot, it's easy to focus on the absurdity of it all. The teddy bears, the bouncy balls, the bizarre language. It's certainly entertaining. But I think if we leave it there, we miss the profound lesson this book has to offer, especially for someone just starting to think about their own career. What Disrupted shows us is that in the modern world of work, the story a company tells about itself is often its most important product. HubSpot wasn't just selling software, it was selling a vision, a movement, a culture. They created a world so compelling, with a mission so inspiring, that young employees were willing to work incredibly hard for modest pay, all while believing they were part of something special. They loved the company. It was their team. And that's the cautionary tale here. It teaches us to look past the surface. A candy wall is nice, but it says nothing about how a company treats its people when things get tough. A fun-loving culture is attractive, but what happens to those who don't fit the mold, whether because of their age, their personality, or their background? The book asks us to become smarter observers of the world around us. So, as you think about the places you might one day work, here are a few simple ideas to carry with you from this story. First, learn to distinguish between perks and culture. Free snacks are a perk. Culture is how people behave, especially when the bosses aren't looking. Culture is how a company handles failure, dissent, and farewells. A company that calls firing someone a graduation isn't being positive, it's avoiding an uncomfortable truth. Look for places that value honesty over forced happiness. Second, listen to the language. Is it filled with buzzwords, acronyms, and slogans that feel like a secret code? Or do people talk to each other like normal human beings? Real communities are built on clear, honest communication, not on a private jargon designed to reinforce an in-group. And finally, trust your own experience. Dan Lyons felt like an alien from day one because, in that environment, he was. He tried to ignore his instincts and fit in, but his internal compass was telling him the truth all along. If a place feels wrong, if it makes you feel like you have to pretend to be someone you're not, pay attention to that feeling. It's often the wisest guide you have. In the end, Dan's time at HubSpot wasn't a failure. It was an education. He thought he was leaving journalism behind, but his misadventure led him right back to his true calling, storytelling. He became a writer for a hit TV show and wrote this very book, turning a difficult experience into a source of wisdom and humor for the rest of us. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the wrong path is exactly what we need to find the right one. That was a deep dive into Disrupted by Dan Lyons. We've explored the main journey today, but a summary is like looking at a map of a great city. It shows you the layout, but it can't convey the feeling of walking its streets. The real power of this book is in the small moments, the sharp observations, and the sheer humor of Dan's voice. This summary is here to help you decide if this is a journey worth taking. If any part of this story has sparked your curiosity or made you think twice about the world of work, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning, it's an experience that might just change how you see the path ahead. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this exploration valuable, it would mean the world to us if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next adventure into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing together.